everybody who actually asked about parliamentary business. We now come to the backbench debate on International Men's Day. Nick Fletcher to move.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, it's an honour to lead this year's debate on International Men's Day, and I hope this year's speech gets as much publicity as last year's did. Last year's speech led to much controversy, but I do believe the message did get over that boys need role models, and positive role models at that. I asked to hold this debate again because I am the chair of the APPG for issues affecting men and boys, and as such, International Men's Day, which we mark on Saturday, is an important date in the diary. It is a time to highlight many issues that men and boys face, but also a time to celebrate many of the wonderful charities out there that are doing such wonderful work. Andy's Man Club, Men's Sheds, Lads Needs Dads, Men and Boys Coalition, to name just a few. But I also want to speak about these issues because I want to help society as a whole. I am a father of both a boy and a girl, well now both young adults, and I want both to do equally well. However, the reason that I joined the APPG for issues affecting men and boys is because there were too many issues that I see at constituency and national level that have a negative impact on men and boys with no concerted action to tackle them. And of course, these issues have a negative impact on women and girls too, whether that be a brother's suicide, a partner dying from prostate cancer, a son who is failing at school, violence that a man commits against a woman, sometimes in the most horrific ways. Men and women all share lives and society together. My reason is therefore this: if we help half the population become better equipped at handling life and more comfortable in being themselves, by doing so, we then in turn help the other half of the population. It's a win-win. With the help of debates like this, and in my role as chair of the APPG, I hope to do just that. Much of the work our APPG has done recently has been on the issues of men's suicide. It is tragic that 13 men each day see this as the only solution to the problems that they face. Our evidence sessions discovered that although getting men to talk and open up is an amazing thing to do for them and helps so much, that is not enough. There are often underlying causes that, even if discussed, if not properly dealt with, men still often see suicide as a genuine way out, regardless of therapy. These issues... Please don't.
Thank you so much, and thank you for holding this important debate. My brother sadly took his life recently, so I would like to give a big shout out to all those community initiatives and charities that support men, particularly the Amloch Men's Sheds and also the Amloch Walking Football Team, who do so much to support men's mental health and their well-being right across Anglesey.
I thank you for the Honourable Lady's intervention. I'm ever so sorry to hear that news too. I'm hoping through a debate like this we can really reduce that to zero. The issues that can cause this can be chronic health issues, such as a bad back that stops them working. They can be money worries through not earning enough or poor financial management. It could be a sudden bereavement of someone close to them, or one main issue I've seen in my own constituency is the consequences arising from the breakdown of a marriage and relationships. Each of these has its own reasons why, and it can often appear more difficult for men to deal with. Take the bad back. Like whiplash claims and now mental health issues, men suffering with chronic pain can often be accused of trying it on. Paid days off work, no obvious visible signs of injury, often leads to the opinion that he must be swinging the lead. I am sure that some have tried it on over the years, but that's what is so dangerous. The fraudsters, they do actually make it so much worse for the genuine cases. Years of chronic pain with no one believing is no fun. The man of the house, again a saying that unfortunately doesn't help, not being able to fulfil the role he believes and thinks he should, and a role far too often society believes he should too. So we have two paths. A path of help from someone who listens and then helps, or another path, health problems, depression, anxiety, addictions, loneliness, and for some, they will think about suicide. Talking is good, but practical support is needed too.
grateful for the member who's brought this debate. I'm not sure if he's aware of the social media on TikTok of a video that says a woman, what do you do as a man when you have a problem? And it's collected together with men saying, nothing, no one cares. I have no one to speak to. Isn't that the biggest point when it comes to men's health? When they talk about it, they feel there is no one there to support them, they feel forgotten about, and they feel ignored. And that's the key to getting this policy in place to support men and men's mental health.
I couldn't agree more. I thank you, the Honourable Member, for his intervention there. This is why I believe Andy's Man's Clubs and Men's Sheds and organisations like that are helping absolutely enormously with this issue that we've got. And the growth of Andy's Man's Club over this past year has been absolutely phenomenal. So the need is there. And I thank the Honourable Gentleman for his comments. Same again with the man who's lost his job and feels he has no other job to go to. He feels that he has no worth, no value. The more he feels like this, the less he values himself, the less chance he has of getting a job or climbing the ladder to get a better job. Wanting to be the breadwinner, another unhelpful phrase. Wanting to have the best for his family, not wanting to say no to his kids. Eviction notice, car finance too much, electric meter cutting out, and sometimes with someone in his ear telling him that he's a failed man. So again, we have two paths. A path of help from someone who listens and then helps, or another path of health problems, depression, anxiety, addictions, loneliness, and for some, they will think of suicide. Talking is good, but practical support is needed too. Marriage breakdown is always a bad time for both individuals. It has a real impact, even more so when children are involved. I spoke with a local divorce lawyer and he always says the best outcome a man can expect from his divorce is 50% of the asset and to see his kids every other weekend. It can lead to other significant problems. The man rightfully should pay his dues and wants to. He needs to provide for his kids, but he has to have somewhere to live too. The lonely bedsit, the noisy neighbours, the heating off, the empty fridge, the continual breaches of child arrangement orders with no consequences but are more ignored solicitors' letters and legal fees, alongside parental alienation by having their children's head needlessly turned against them by the other parent. Their weekend with the kids postponed for no good reason, kids not seeing dad for good reason, kids not keen on seeing dad as the bedsit is cold and never has any money. The next weekend missed again, so a solicitor letter must be sent, only to be ignored. More money spent on legal fees that he doesn't and shouldn't have to. My mailbox is regularly filled with letters from fathers, and also some mothers too, to be fair, complaining about the injustice of it all. They are heartbreaking to read, and I am sure other members receive the same. So again, we have two paths. One of help from someone who listens and then helps, or another path, health problems, depression, anxiety, addictions, loneliness, and for some, they will think about suicide. Talking is good, but practical support is needed too. The APPG heard that some men believe that suicide is an actual practical solution to a problem. Can we believe that? They can't see their way through. They can't cope. They feel that nobody will miss them and they have no value. They got themselves here. This is not what a man should be like. They have tried to get help and neither no one can or no one cares or no one will listen. So that path led to nowhere. So this is it. This is my path. Goodbye. No, this can't be right. We must stop this. We really do need a Minister for Men who can coordinate an action and champion issues affecting men and boys. Whether that be lower exam results than girls, men sleeping rough, or understanding why 80,000 men are in our prisons. We also need a men's health strategy too, to deliver firm action and to break down so many of the health barriers facing men. We need...
For him giving away on that point. My time before I came into this house was as a GP, and so I saw the difference between the way in which men present from women and the way in which people choose to interact. Now, they're gross generalisations, but in medicine, a generalisation is a very useful way of understanding patterns, and pattern recognition is important. It's building up that trust, understanding that a status that a man brings and that need for status is really important, but also that vulnerability and building up that trust to allow them to speak about the issues that may come in. Equally, men can be very transactional. And it's understanding these differences, which is why we need a male health strategy to balance off against a female health strategy. Does my right honourable friend agree that now is the right time for this?
Thank my honourable friend. It's helping enormously with this debate, just to say that. And we have spoken, so with my honourable friend before, about a men's health strategy, and yes, now is the time. There's an old phrase that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, the next best time is now, and that's exactly where we are with a men's health strategy and a men's minister. We need someone to be accountable across government, and also that means putting pressure and targets on health bodies and the education system. Ensuring the government's own Equalities Office gives equal reference to men as a group they support would be a welcome start. Equality means equal and fair treatment. When you ask members of the public, including in so-called red wall seats like mine, whether it is fair and equal to have a minister for women and not a minister for men, they of course say no. They, like me, believe we should have both. Why would anyone who truly believes in equality think different? Let's stop talking in government and let's start doing. So, why do many men get through life and so many men don't? Is it just luck of the draw, or is it that solid family upbringing? Well, I don't believe in luck, but I do believe in family, and I do believe in good role models. But only good dads and good mums and good role models. Dads and men who put their kids first, not the ones who just say it. The ones who put their kids before themselves every time, help with homework before the football, school shoes and a full fridge before a big TV, tuck them into bed and not going down to the pub. The ones who show how to treat women properly, who show how to love their mum. The dads that are good role models, and the mums and wives who let their partner be that good role model too. Not luck, just good role models who show boys how to become men and how to cope and how to deal with life's knocks. Now, we know families do break up. We know it can be just as much the man's fault as the woman. But we must remember, whatever the breakup is caused by, the kids must come first. Why? Because they need a male role model just as much as a good mum. But equally, dads need their kids too. They need that value in their life. That part of their life where they are genuinely worth something, not just money or material things, just that value of being dad. And when I talk about good dads, I mean good stepdads too. And by letting this happen, we let the child become a good man, one that does all the things we want good men to do. So if we see a man struggling in his life, we need to talk to him, find out what has gone wrong, what's the real problem, what's the solution, write a plan with him, put our arms around his shoulder, help put the value back in him. He might not have had a good role model himself. He might not know what he's doing wrong. He might not know how to put it right. But if we help him, then we give him another path, and then maybe, just maybe, he'll turn into a great role model himself. I'm not sure this speech will get as much publicity as the last, but I hope it does. Then hopefully we can all help a man in our life, who in turn will treat the women in our lives and show the next generation what a good life can look like, what a good man can look like. Some men do wrong, some men struggle, and sadly some men take their own life. We should rehabilitate the ones who do wrong, we should help the ones who struggle, we should listen and practically support the ones who are desperate, and we should celebrate the majority of men who are good. Let it not be a competition between men and women. Let it be a family and a population working together for good. So I ask at the end of my speech that we put in place a Minister for Men, someone who can champion their cause, who can take an overarching look at government policy, and who can be made accountable to reduce the many sad statistics that will no doubt be repeated throughout this debate. We need a minister to champion the places where men talk, but also look at the solutions that can and should be put in place to practically help men and boys with their issues. As it was written in our latest report, no point in listening if no one is acting or doing. We need a minister who can make sure that boys have the male role models they need away from home so they grow up to be good men, and local government and community groups in place for those men who have missed out on a good man in their lives so far. It is often said that prevention is better than a cure, and I applaud this sentiment, but some men have already been let down, so we need both role models for our boys and help for our men. Let us celebrate International Men's Day 2022 with the Minister for Men. Thank you.
The question is as on the order paper. Margaret Ferrier.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I would like to congratulate the Honourable Member for Don Valley for securing this year's debate and for chairing the APPG so well. I'd also like to thank the Backbench Business Committee for granting this debate in the Chamber this year. International Men's Day is an opportunity to celebrate boys and men and their contributions to society and their communities. It's also an opportunity to look at the issues facing them in the modern world, raise awareness and hopefully spark meaningful change. It would be remiss of me to not give mention to the team behind Movember, who for so many years now have worked hard in successive Novembers to bring awareness to prostate cancer, a really important issue to shine a light on for men across the UK. I also want to thank Samaritans for sharing their briefing with colleagues ahead of today's debate so that we can address one of the most crucial issues impacting men today and the reasons behind its suicide. And I want to pass on my sympathy to the Honourable Lady for Innismone on the loss of her brother. Some of the darkest statistics we will hear today are around suicide. Men account for 3/4 of all suicides, and it is the leading cause of death in men under 50 here in the UK. Each life lost to suicide is devastating. It leaves a hole in the lives of families, friends, communities that can never be filled. Most tragically, I think almost all suicides could be preventable if the person had access to the right support, if the societal and socio-economic factors could be addressed. Today's social media age has brought with it new challenges, building upon a pressure that had existed for women for centuries, the pressure to look good. This wasn't a new phenomenon that came with the birth of Facebook or Instagram. Men will have been influenced too by glossy photos of celebrities and models of magazine stands and in films. This constant pressure has consequences for those of us that don't wake up every day looking like an airbrushed model from a catalogue. The discourse around this will often focus on the impact felt by women, and there are reasons for that. I think this pressure is ingrained in girls from a much younger age and much more overtly, but often overlooked is the impact it is having on boys and men. The way this manifests in girls and women might look different, perhaps more easily recognised. Men struggling with body image or eating disorders might focus their energy on exercise or the gym. This might mean that to the naked eye it seems healthy, they're bulking up, building muscle. Societal beauty standards are different. I'm happy to give way.
Well, she brings up such an important point when it comes to body image, especially around the male physique. And we know that there are between 500,000 to 1 million people using anabolic steroids to try and get that perfect image. And this is ongoing in the UK without us being aware. Does she think this should have more focus from the government on looking at these kind of issues that affect men specifically?
Member for making that intervention, and he's an expert in this area, and I absolutely agree with him. It would be good if they could look at this, hence the reason for mentioning this today in this debate. Societal beauty standards are different for men. While thinness might be an aspirational expectation set through the media for women, for men it's generally not. For men it's that image of fitness, the muscular build, and that means that often the signs in men are not recognised. Eating disorders are indiscriminate when it comes to gender. There are many, and while anorexia is of course devastating, there is also bulimia, compulsive eating. These disorders can ravage the body, but they also have an extreme detrimental effect on the mind. While the research on eating disorders in men is inconsistent, having only really begun in recent years, there are some figures that might illustrate how much more prevalent this is than many of us actually realise. A study by Beat in 2021 estimated that there are approximately 1.25 million people in the UK with an eating disorder. The same survey estimated that about 25% of those people are male. That is tens of thousands of men and boys suffering with these conditions and struggling to access the right support. Some of these males may not even realise they have an eating disorder themselves. There are two big issues at play here, and both come down to eating disorders being viewed as a female problem. First, the social stigma and difficulty men experience, both recognising they have an eating disorder and seeking help. Anorexia, for example, is often seen as a problem caused by vanity, which is not only untrue, but a simplistic and narrow view of a disease that is unbelievably complex. The social stigma attached to male mental health is huge, and the less issues are spoken about, the more isolating and shameful it can feel. The second is that as a result, men and boys will hide these feelings. They won't proactively seek help. With the NHS as stretched as it is, and because eating disorders are more commonly recognised in women, health professionals are also less likely to spot the signs in men. I referred to the body ideal for men as being seen as muscular, and I want to touch upon muscle dysmorphia, a form of body dysmorphic disorder, which does have a higher incidence rate in men, sometimes referred to as reverse anorexia. Muscle dysmorphia is defined by being preoccupied by worries that one's body is too small or not muscular enough, despite having a normal build or, in many cases, an objectively extremely buff physique. Basically, a completely distorted view of their body. Although it has some overlap with eating disorders, it isn't one. However, the fixation on this body type and the steps men take in pursuing it can lead to unhealthy eating habits, strict dieting, and develop into an eating disorder. Media and pop culture, magazines, TV, computer games all perpetuate this imagery, this stereotype that is unnecessary and only feeds into a hyper-masculine cultural ideal that is harmful to men and boys themselves in so many ways. The occurrence of eating disorders in men and boys is also closely linked to a number of other mental health conditions. Risk factors include depression, anxiety, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and mood disorders. One study also shows that men with eating disorders are 2 times more likely to have comorbid substance abuse issues, misusing drugs like cocaine or stimulants for their appetite-suppressing side effects. This is a monumental issue for the men experiencing these problems, and it needs better recognition.
I'm very grateful to her for giving way, and I'm very, very pleased to hear her highlighting this terrible crisis and tragedy of male eating disorders. And does she share with me my concern? Not only is attention not sufficiently given to men and boys who suffer from eating disorders, but we're not very good at, as a society generally, at supporting people who've been through the acute phase of eating disorder, may have got their weight back, and then supporting them to recover. We're better at it with girls and young women. We're terrible at that post-acute phase, that rehabilitation phase for boys and men.
I thank the Honourable Member for his intervention, and yes, that rehabilitation stage does need to be better and also include men and boys and not just women, so I thank him for that intervention. But as I say, this is a monumental issue for the men experiencing these problems, and it needs better recognition. They need better help. I mentioned earlier obsessive-compulsive disorder, or OCD. Like most mental health issues, it's not something that affected men find easy to talk about. Representation in media has often presented it as quirky or comical. It's trivialised. How many times have you heard someone say light-heartedly, I'm really OCD about that, when talking about keeping their desk neat or their kitchen clean? But OCD is a serious mental health concern. Like many others, it will have a spectrum of severity, with some people experiencing milder symptoms. For others, the constant intrusive thoughts can really limit quality of life. It's not just rituals like we see on TV, switching on a light switch exactly 10 times, for example. All these traits are common. It's also feeling completely unable to control your brain's darkest thoughts. It's worst fears until it's all-consuming and there is nothing you can do to stop it. OCD often has a distinct thought pattern: obsession, anxiety, compulsive behaviours and temporary relief. It is a cycle that repeats. It's commonly comorbid with anxiety, depression and eating disorders. Most people with OCD see that their compulsions are irrational or illogical. Still, they feel an overwhelming need to act upon it just in case. It is another condition that, because of its perception in media and more widely, men really struggle to admit experiencing. Many see it as shameful or a weakness. People with OCD and depression will often experience suicidal ideation. So I want to reflect here on the links to eating disorders and suicide and male mental health generally. And there are organisations that can help support those that think they may have an eating disorder, and I would encourage anyone who thinks they might, or they know someone who might, to take a look at the charity Beat, their website. They have lots of good information on their site, and their national helpline is open 365 days a year to offer swift help and advice. Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, it is so hard for so many men to break down the barriers to accessing the right mental health support. As a society, we need to do better at looking at the men in our lives and letting them know that it's okay to need some help. In fact, it's normal.
Dean Russell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I would also like to thank the member for Don Valley for the work that he's done to make sure that we secure this debate today. I have to say I'm a little bit disappointed, because I would have hoped on a debate about half of the nation that the benches would be a bit more full in this place, but perhaps that's a signal of what the challenge is, because often when we talk about men's issues, we don't talk about men's issues. And I think the difficulty on a debate like today, where we should be celebrating all of the immense impacts that men have across society, I'm afraid my speech will probably focus on the same as others, which is about mental health and suicide, and the fact that we should be talking more and encouraging men to talk more about the challenges that they are facing. But men contribute so much to society, and I wish I was here with full benches talking about the immense impact that men have for good in our society, just as we would do if this was Women's International Day, where we would quite rightly be celebrating the impact they have for us all. I would just like to start with a point really that I've mentioned many times in this place, which is about mental health and the need for greater support for mental health. I did a 10-minute rule bill, which I'm going to try and bring back at some point to make sure that mental health first aid awareness is part of normal first aid, physical first aid within the workplace, because I think one of the challenges is that people, and men in particular, don't know how to talk about issues that they might be facing, and they don't always have to wait until it's the worst time, that it's all affected them in a way that is visible, but actually should be able to talk early in the stages of challenges that they might be facing. And I think part of the challenge that we have in society is this idea that men are supposed to be all strong, as the Right Honourable Member just mentioned now, that this idea of, almost the physical nature that men had to have. The Arnold Schwarzeneggers and the Sylvester Stallones from the 1980s that I grew up with. It was about this idea of, you're ultimately strong. You should not show weakness, because as a man, if you show weakness, you are weak. But actually, I say the opposite. I say to show a weakness, to talk about a weakness, to ask for help. That is the greatest strength that you can have. And the challenge for many is that they aren't asking, they aren't looking for that support, because they don't always know where to go for it. They don't know who they can trust, who won't mock them, who won't ask them questions of things that perhaps they don't feel comfortable talking about. And I think this has been exacerbated, as was mentioned earlier, around social media. Andy Warhol had the very famous statement that in the future everyone would have 15 minutes of fame. I say sadly now it's 15 minutes of shame, because when you raise a concern, you get mocked for it. If you're not popular, then somehow that's a reason why people can attack you. They can say horrid things to you and move on to the next person. We see it in politics. I often call it, sadly, sniper politics, the idea that you take out one individual, whether it be in politics or celebrity or in our community, where there's just a pile-on, a hate pile-on of people being vile to people in a moment, and then moving on to their next victim and their next victim. And so is it any wonder that men and women, but I think men in the case of this debate, feel awkward raising concerns, talking to their friends in a way that might be shared or laughed at. But I don't think it has to be that way. I think there's lots of opportunities for men to take control of their lives by asking others to help them. And I think one of those areas is by forming stronger networks and by also having a society where we do help each other and we listen to each other and we share that. And I think that's where debates like today are so important, and why I applaud the member for Don Valley, especially after the pile-on he had last year from making comments in this place. Because the truth is, when you're attacked in such a way, to come back as he has done today in a place that could have been quite vulnerable and open for attack, actually he's come back to say, no, I do believe in this. This is a strong place to be in. And actually, that is a strength, because sometimes it's hard to go against the grain. Sometimes it's hard to talk about issues that perhaps others don't always agree with. And that's where this place is so important. That's why I would have loved the benches to be full of people talking about the challenges they face, because we are, ultimately, whether people like us or not, role models. And I think within society we have to look at how role models play a part, whether that be teachers in schools, whether that be sports people, whether it be the doctor or the nurse down the road who's working perhaps at a care home. All of these people across society are people that young kids, boys and girls, but boys in the case of this debate, can look up to and see a career option and actually break down some of those barriers. When people think of nurses, they should think of men and women. When they think of care home workers, they should think of men and women. They should not just think of a particular type of role for a particular type of person. But I think the other area within that is also thinking about places like gyms. I've recently visited a gym in my own constituency of Watford called NRG. I visited one called Cage Fit previously, and I was hearing amazing stories actually of people who do MMA, the fighting. Thankfully, I didn't get in the ring. I don't think I would have fared too well. But what they were talking about was actually how the impact of going to gyms like that, actually the phrase that was used when I was chatting to one of the gentlemen was, once they learn that they can fight in the ring for money, they don't want to fight on the streets for free. And the point was really about antisocial behaviour, about kids who are perhaps in areas or in difficult circumstances, perhaps being encouraged to join gangs, of going to join a gym, to get around other positive role models, but also learning that they have value in other ways through their physique or through their mental capacity. Yeah, please.
I'm grateful for the member for what we're giving away, and I think he's really hit on something here about we shouldn't be shy of having masculinity coming forward. It's how you use it in a positive way forward, be it in sport, be it in going to the gym, or being a father figure. This is really, really important. If we try and close that down, it closes status. If we close status, we produce people's bad mental health. So does he support that philosophy after what he's seen in his gym?
Oh, absolutely. I thank the honourable friend from Bosworth for the work that he does, especially around physical attributes and making sure that people online don't feel through their body image that they should be attacked. But I absolutely agree. I think there's an element of surrounding oneself with role models, but also feeling like you can be the best version of you. And I think that's the challenge that we often see, is that we're creating a society, potentially partly through online media, of shaping people to be something that they are not, that they can use digital, whatever they're called, digital tools to change the way they look online, and then they compare themselves in the mirror to that unrealistic ideal that they perhaps see. Oh yes, absolutely.
Yeah, he is making an excellent speech. He's talking about the impact, the negative impact sometimes of online social media and pylons and things like that. But does he not also agree that the more time boys particularly are spending online, the less time they're spending offline, having in the physical presence of other young men and boys, doing things like climbing trees, taking appropriate risks and doing the kind of things that really will improve their mental health and their physical health much more than sitting in bedrooms alone on the internet?
I my honourable friend makes an incredibly important point, and I know this is an area that she understands incredibly well and has done incredible work in this space. Absolutely, 100%. You know, of course there's a place for digital, there's a place for social media, there's a place for the internet, but if that becomes the world that you exist in, that has to be a bad thing. You know, it's, you know, girls climb trees too, but boys can climb trees with girls, you know, and the point being is that, you know, going out into the real world and spending time with real people and learning those social cues, understanding the challenges that one faces, and also understanding how, you know, rejection is something that you can learn in the real world and in the virtual world, but actually you learn how to deal with it with friends. You learn how to deal with it through talking about it. And I suppose my point really is coming back to a statement I used in my maiden speech, is that I often say I use an acronym of HOPE, and I say that HOPE is an acronym and stands for HOPE, help one person every day. So help one person every day. And the reason why I use that is that sometimes that one person has to be yourself. Sometimes that person has to be able to say, look, I need to go and speak to somebody about how I'm feeling. I need to perhaps go to the pub on a Friday night and have a laugh with my friends and chat about stuff that's been challenging me, or issues that I've got, and not feel like I have to keep this all inside. I'll start to round up, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm conscious there aren't many speakers. I won't speak for the full hour left, but although Madam Deputy Speaker knows that I probably could. But what I did want to just come to a couple of important points, which is about suicide, and we've talked about this in this debate already. Men are invariably more likely to take their lives than women. And that's a saddening statistic. And it's the same around the world, I understand. In the UK, we have to try and stop this. It's not just about speaking to people, it's about making sure the network is there. But also for those who've gone through that process and sadly got to the point of perhaps trying to take their own lives, making sure they have the support long term. And it's one of the points I would make to the Minister, is making sure that we have the mental health support for young people and all alike, so that they have that long-term support to get through these challenging times. I recently visited the Samaritans in Watford and found that they do incredible work to make sure that they're end of the line for somebody, and of course there's anonymity there to be able to make sure that they're supported. But one of the things I am proud of within Hertfordshire is that Hertfordshire County Council, they have this as one of their top priorities. They want to create a county which is suicide-free, and I want to create a country which is suicide-free. But we only do that by talking about it. We only do that by each one of us in each of our constituencies going back and saying, look, we need to make this a top priority. We need to save lives, we need to change lives, and we need to make sure that the next generation knows this is important. So just as I finish, I'm going to finish with a statement that I made the last time I spoke in International Men's Day, which is just to remind anybody who might be watching this debate that they should ask others if they're okay. Not just once, not just twice, but every time they see them. And they should also ask themselves, am I really okay? Because by doing that, we can make sure that we have a society that cares, that people can be signposted to the help they need, but also make sure that we really do deliver a compassionate country that saves lives, changes lives, and makes people the ability, or giving them the ability, to be the best they can be. Thank you.
Miriam Case.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's an honour to follow on from my honourable friend, the member for Watford, who made an excellent speech. And can I congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Don Valley, for securing this debate, and then other honourable members have said, for his phenomenal work in supporting men and boys. And as one Yorkshire MP to another, I admire his ability to say things how they are, say it as it is, even if you do sometimes get some stick. Madam Deputy Speaker, can I declare an interest in this debate? I have a husband, a dad, brothers, nephews and 2 sons, and I was even fortunate enough to get to the age of 40 with both my grandfathers still alive. Sadly, one of them passed away recently at the age of 92, had a long and fulfilling life, including growing churches on the islands of the Torres Strait off North Queensland. And my other grandfather recently reached the age of 90. He enjoyed a fulfilling life, an amazing career, and could beat me at table tennis until the age of 80. So I'm extremely fortunate to have a family full of amazing male role models, fathers, dads, including my own husband, who right now is probably juggling tea time, homework and piano practice. So I'm very grateful to him for doing that. So it's a real privilege to speak in this International Men's Day debate, to honour all the great things that men contribute to our families, our communities and our nation, and also to discuss some of the unique challenges that are faced by men and boys in this country. Madam Deputy Speaker, men and women are different biologically, psychologically, socially. We've evolved for very different functions in society, different functions in families. Men and women are equal but not the same. And I think one of the mistakes in recent years has been to push for equality between the sexes, which is right, but without recognising important differences and without celebrating male virtues and male roles. And we frequently talk, rightly, about how to get more women into engineering or technology, but we pay insufficient attention to the decline in young men gaining technical skills and the fact that boys are falling behind girls in education. And when the traditional virtues of masculinity and male identity are portrayed as redundant or negative or not uniquely male, what is there left for young men to aspire to? It's certainly a confusing time to be a young man. I certainly will.
I entirely agree with what she's saying, and the statement of toxic masculinity is really dangerous potentially, because we set our young boys up to think that there's something innately wrong with them in the way they interact with society. Does she feel that's a problem?
Yes, I absolutely agree with my honourable friend, and I think the danger of not giving a positive version of masculinity, something that's unique, something that's positive, something that is good for society, we're actually, sadly, driving some young men and boys to the far right, who are giving a version of masculinity that none of us here would support, but is offering them something that at the moment some of the discussions in society don't. And that's why it's so important that we do offer something to young boys. I think some of the economic and social changes over the last 40 years have had benefits, but they've also had significant costs, particularly for working class men and boys. The decline of industry, and therefore skilled, well-paid, secure jobs, has caused a drop in wealth, in health and status for many men. In my constituency, the steelworks in the town of Stocksbridge used to employ 11,000 men, now it's 750. But steel jobs still pay 50% more than the average Yorkshire wage. They require skills and they confer status. But these kind of jobs are now few and far between. And the loss of these jobs and the economic and social consequences for men have been severe, and we need to consider how we can reinvest in British industry, not to go back to the past, but to pivot to the skilled, advanced manufacturing jobs of the future, like those at the Speciality Steels plant in my constituency and in Stocksbridge. Not only would a revival in manufacturing and industry be good news for men, it would also be beneficial to the UK economy, which has a terrible balance of trade. We don't make anywhere near enough stuff ourselves, and also for our security and our self-sufficiency in important materials like steel. And while industrial and manufacturing jobs have declined, the number of young people going to university has soared. Now, of course, there have been benefits to this, but there is no clear relationship between the number of graduates and a nation's GDP, and we're now in a situation where we have far more graduates than we require in our economy, and around 50% of recent graduates are now thought to be in jobs that don't require that level of academic education. And this focus, and I would almost say this obsession with cognitive credentials, with degrees, over technical or vocational skills, has been particularly disadvantageous for working class young men. Recent research shows that median earnings of men from the bottom 23 universities were less than the median earnings for non-graduates. In other words, a significant number of younger men will be better off not going to university, not to mention the debt that they'll acquire while they're there. So I'm delighted that the government is pushing a skills agenda, but we must do more to open up apprenticeships to young men. The Chancellor's announcement today that we'll move towards a German and Swiss model of skills education is great news, but we should also take another look at our enormous higher education budget, I think about £14 billion a year, and to consider whether some of it could be better employed, both for the benefit of young people and also for the benefit of the economy. As well as the decline of industry, men and boys have also suffered as a result of the decline of family stability over the last few decades. The most stable form of family, as my honourable friend said earlier, and one that has the best outcomes for children, is where parents are married. That's not a value judgment, it's very clear from the evidence. married parents are twice as likely to stay together as non-married parents. By the time they turn 5, 53% of children of cohabiting parents will have experienced their parents' separation. Among 5-year-olds with married parents, it's just 15%. Married men live happier, longer, healthier lives, and boys with committed present fathers have much better outcomes than boys in families where they don't. So marriage is good for men and boys, and yet marriage rates have declined significantly over recent years, particularly among lower income groups. And marriage has almost become a middle-class secret. Among high-income white couples, so the top 20% of incomes, around 85% of people are married. In the lower income group, the bottom 20% of white people, only 19% are married and have much higher rates of divorce. So if you're a poor white child, you're very unlikely to have a father. If you're rich and white, you're very likely to have a father. That's how stark the difference is. And there's also been a huge rise in loneliness amongst middle-aged men as a result of family breakdown. And family breakdown is contributing to the housing crisis. As one of my colleagues earlier said, I think actually it might have been the Honourable Lady, when families break down, you need a second home. That adds to the housing crisis as well as obviously creating financial problems for the family. And the UK is an outlier amongst Western nations in that our policies and our tax system don't recognise families and they don't recognise strong couple relationships and marriage. So, for example, in the UK, we are taxed on an individual basis. The Chancellor of the Exchequer, the HMRC only sees your individual income and you pay tax on that individual income without any account of how many people that income is supporting. So, for example, if you earn £50,000 a year, which is considered a high wage, slightly more than £50,000, thinking about the tax thresholds, but you're supporting, let's say, a family of 6, you are taxed the same as someone earning £50,000 and a single person not supporting anybody else at all. And yet, as you enter the higher tax rate, you lose your child benefit, you start to have all kinds of other knock-on effects of that tax system. In other countries, in France and Germany and Canada and the US, they have different systems where you can be taxed as a household, where family policy recognises the benefit of parenting and supports families as a result. So we need to reform our taxation system to be much more pro-family, to make it easier for couples to stay together. I'm delighted about the government's Family Hubs programme, and I think we particularly need to decide how to determine how these family hubs are going to support fathers in the early years to be involved in the bringing up of their children. But I want to move on to a final issue that is affecting health and well-being of men, and particularly boys, in a truly alarming way. We have a growing public health crisis as a result of the proliferation of online pornography. In 2020, pornography websites received more website traffic than Twitter, Instagram, Netflix, Zoom, Pinterest and LinkedIn combined. For too long, society has viewed porn as a private matter, assuming that what people do in the privacy of their own homes is their own business. But it's clear that the impacts on society and culture have been significant and negative, and we must wake up to the destructive impacts of internet pornography. There's nothing mainstream about the porn now available online. Mainstream pornography platforms host vast unknown quantities of filmed crimes, videos of trafficking, rape, non-consensual sexual violence, child sexual abuse material, sexual coercion, abuse and exploitation of vulnerable women and children, intrafamilial rape, humiliation, punishment, torture and pain, all available at the click of a mouse or the touch of an iPhone. Analysis of around 130,000 titles of videos recommended to first-time users of Pornhub and other major sites found that 1 in every 8 titles described sexual activities that constitute sexual violence. And the word teen was the most frequently occurring word across the dataset. The second most common category was that of physical aggression and sexual assault. Viewing these videos affects what men, particularly boys, think about sex, what they think is normal, what they think is acceptable. Of course, it's right to think about the impact of pornography on women and girls. And it's notable that so many high-profile rapes and murders in recent years have been committed by men who are addicted to hardcore pornography, including the tragic murder of Sarah Everard. But children's consumption of online pornography has been associated with a dramatic increase in child-on-child sexual abuse, which now constitutes around 1/3 of all child sexual abuse. So we also need to think about the negative impact on boys. Around 50% of 12-year-olds have seen pornography online. And in the UK, 1.4 million children access it every month. A UK survey found that 44% of boys between 11 and 16 who regularly view pornography reports that it gave them ideas about the kind of sex they want to try. We've seen the normalisation of strangulation during sex, of anal sex amongst young people. There was a case reported a year or so ago of a boy who raped a girl in school, and when the teacher asked him why he didn't stop, he said, "I thought it was normal for girls to cry during sex." How are these boys ever going to enjoy normal, loving, fulfilling, intimate relationships? During puberty, boys' brains develop. They have an erotic imprint where it's laid down what they see as normal, appropriate sexual behaviour. This imprint will stay with them for the rest of their life. How many of these boys will be drawn into serious sex offences? How many will endure broken relationships, broken families, or never form relationships at all? It also affects boys' health. We're seeing an increase in erectile dysfunction amongst teenage boys. And on the extreme end, a constant use of pornography can quickly lead men not to become aroused by anything other than hardcore online porn. This is why it is so important that this House passes the online safety bill when it returns, that it goes through the House of Lords and becomes an act of Parliament. We must introduce secure age verification so no children can access pornography websites, and we must stop children accidentally viewing or deliberately sharing pornographic images with each other online. While children's brains are developing, it is so crucial that they do not have access to this extreme material. At the moment, it's completely unregulated, and I'm afraid people who say it's parents' responsibility to make sure their children don't view it are not living in the real world. Even if your child has no phone, even if your child has no computer, all it takes is a classmate to put their own phone in front of that child, in front of your child, for them to see this stuff. Your child is only as safe as the least protected child in your child's class. And it's a bit like telling parents to teach their children to cross the road safely if there was no speed limit, no crossing points, no side of the road that you legally had to drive on. It would be completely impossible. Internet pornography is currently completely unregulated, and it is a public health disaster. So on top of the online safety bill, we also need a public health inquiry led by the Department for Health into the harms of pornography. Yes to women and girls, yes the harms to the economy, the criminal aspects, but also the harms to boys and men, to their happiness, their fulfilment, and their physical and mental health. The future social impact of this porn epidemic will be catastrophic if we don't protect our boys and girls. And I believe that online pornography is the opiates trade of our age, and we should be outraged by what our children are seeing. Madam Deputy Speaker, our families, our communities and our nation need strong, confident, healthy and skilled boys and men. It's therefore in all of our interests to invest in skills and industry, to support marriage and families, and to end the destruction of online pornography.
SNP spokesperson Steve Bonnar.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Let me, of course, congratulate the Honourable Member for Don Valley on opening the debate for us today, and all honourable and right honourable members who have made valuable contributions to it, and also to the Backbench Business Committee for bringing forward this debate on International Men's Day, a day where we recognise not only the contribution of men to society, but more importantly the long-lasting and Semitic issues faced by many of us. As an MP sent here from Scotland and a representative of the Scottish National Party, I want to stress just how important it is to me and my party that we persistently address inequality wherever we may find it. We will never as a nation, or indeed as a society, truly flourish if we are not enabling all of our people the opportunities they deserve and the chance to fulfil their potential, whatever their social or economic backgrounds. For far too many men across these islands, that chance and those opportunities are not always possible. Indeed, it is becoming increasingly unattainable for many of us. And far too often we hear of the consequences of negative mental health on men, but little of the factors and the root causes of this. According to studies conducted by the Mental Health Foundation, societal expectations and traditional gender roles and stereotypes contribute as to why men are far less likely to open up and discuss or seek support about their mental health problems. And we know that gender stereotypes faced by women, the idea that they should behave in a certain way, look a certain way or dress a certain way, for example, can be hugely damaging, not only to them as individuals, but also to our society as a whole. So it is also important to understand that stereotypes and expectations can also have a detrimental impact for many men. We find it difficult to talk about our feelings, to open up and admit we are not coping well with the demands of life. That is to say, the demands that are real and present, but also those we often perceive to be upon us. Men are also more likely to turn to harmful coping methods, such as growing a dependency on drugs, alcohol or other harmful escapes. These actions, of course, only serve to exacerbate or compound poor mental health, leading to a downward spiral that far too often ends in the tragic act of a young man taking his own life. So today, I take the opportunity once again to call on the UK Government to devolve drug policy legislation to the Scottish Parliament. This will allow the Scottish Government to properly tackle the root cause of many of the tragic loss of lives in Scotland that we see week in, week out. Madam Deputy Speaker, according to the latest figures from Public Health Scotland, 75% of those who died by suicide in the year 2021 were male, with the highest rate occurring in the 45 to 54-year-old age group. The probable suicide rate was also 3 times higher in the most deprived communities in Scotland when compared to our most affluent areas. And the Honourable Lady opposite spoke about the differences between affluence and the impact that that can have. And we know that work pressures, low pay, relationship breakdowns and parental alienation, being separated from our children after a relationship breakdown, are also key factors that drive men to think that suicide is an option. And the Scottish Government has a determination to see a Scotland where suicide is preventable and that help support is available to anyone contemplating suicide, with further resources made available to anyone struggling with self-harm tendencies or indeed thoughts of suicide. This new Creating Hope Together strategy of the Scottish Government takes a whole government and societal approach so that the social detriments of suicide are tackled, and we take every opportunity we can to identify and support someone who is feeling suicidal. Madam Deputy Speaker, these kind of actions and that type of compassion are regretfully not often always present in this place, and we see that in the treatment of those who are among the most vulnerable people in our society. Young men in the UK asylum system are disproportionately impacted from Britain's frankly inhumane system as it currently operates. The vilification from some in the government and in the mainstream media only serves to add to that. When the Home Secretary uses terminology like invasion to refer to young men, asylum seekers, I ask the House, is she doing so with compassion? No, she is not. Far from it. The asylum system, we know, is broken, but after 12 years of government, 12 years of Tory government rule, the onus of responsibility is on the government's benches. It is they who have created this mess, the backlog, and it is they who have failed to repair what is a broken asylum system, and they must recognise the consequences of that on the mental health of young men. Last year, 46 charities dealing with issues on asylum and children and mental health, including the Refugee Council, the Children's Society and Mind, wrote to the Health Minister in charge of suicide prevention, where they highlighted the dozens of suicides that they had discovered among teenage male asylum seekers fleeing persecution from their home countries. Zoe Gardner, from Policy Advocacy Manager at Joint Council on the Welfare of Immigrants, gave these poignant words in response to the UK Government's current asylum policy. You can be a man and a refugee. You can be a man and a victim of trauma, torture and sexual violence. You can be a man with disabilities. You can be a man who has lived closeted or been abused because of their sexuality. And the narrative that men somehow are not vulnerable and are not in need of protection is, we know, to be completely false. Men are very often the ones targeted in the first place in countries that produce refugees. If the UK Government won't heed the advice on mental health provisions and echo the progressive vision of the Scottish Government to attempt to mitigate the high rates of suicide and poor mental health regulations, then we again call for a devolution of immigration powers to the Scottish Parliament. A Parliament that has, Madam Deputy Speaker, proven time again that no matter where you have come from or your financial background, your well-being will always be a priority. Thank you.
Shadow Minister Yasmin Qureshi.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's a pleasure to speak on behalf of the opposition in this debate. Can I congratulate the Honourable Member for Don Valley for securing this debate and bringing it to the House as well as the Backbench Business Committee. I'm pleased to be taking my place here as the Shadow Women and Equalities Minister and closing for behalf of the Labour Party. And I'm incredibly proud to be in this role because it focuses on addressing inequalities in society wherever we find them. The reality, however, is that we will never, as a country or a society, be able to truly flourish if we do not ensure that everyone can fairly access opportunities and fulfil their potential, whatever their backgrounds may be. Now, I want to thank several honourable members who have spoken in today's debate, starting with the Honourable Member for Rotherham and Hamilton West, where she talked about the overuse of steroids by men to be complying with societal idea of what a physical appealing male should look like, and the whole issue of eating disorder. The Honourable Member for Watford talked about mental health issues and the use of social media and internet, which can aggravate this. And I liked his acronym HOPE, and talked about the Samaritans. And just to tell him, many, many years ago, because I'm from Watford originally, I was actually a member of this marathon. I'm no longer, obviously. And I remember that there was times when people would ring about 3-4 times, the same person with the same problem. And it was quite clear that they needed someone to listen to them and talk to them, not to give them advice, not to guide them, but to actually just listen. So it's just important how much loneliness there is in our society, and especially for men as well. The Honourable Member of Penistone and Stockbridge talked about the men in her life, and can I say to her that I had a great father and a brother, both who passed away. And I know it's not fashionable to say this, but I have a great husband as well. But the issue about toxic masculinity is very pertinent when she said about how it actually has attracted people to the far-right politics, including the issue of pornography, which gives a very warped view about issues of sexuality. And finally, and before I go into the main of my speech, I really want to thank, and I'm sure the whole House would agree with me, but the Honourable Member for Inicion, I hope I pronounced this properly, for sharing about the sad news of her brother's suicide. And I think we all send her condolences to her and her family, and for her to bravely speak about this. Today's discussion is about mental health in particular, and rightly so, because figures from the Samaritans revealed that suicide is the biggest cause of death in men under the age of 50. Around 3/4 of deaths from suicide each year are men. Added to this, data from the Office of National Statistics shows that the highest rates of suicide in men have been in mixed and white ethnic groups. Men aged 45 to 49 are most at risk of suicide, and the rate among this group has been persistently high for many years. Historically, we know there is an often alpha male archetype where many men feel forced to stoically toughen up and get through the bad times, whilst avoid talking up or speaking to people or seeking help. We need to do more to address these very outdated stereotypes of masculinity. And equally, of course, we need to do more to support men who are struggling or are in crisis. Of course, I'd give it up.
Giving way. I'm just interested, does that mean Labour supports the idea of having a male health strategy or a male minister?
Well, I can say that I can take that back to our team for discussion, the point that you have raised. Going back to, but instead, across 1.6 million people are currently on an NHS waiting list for specialised mental health treatment. That is around 1 in 35 people, or roughly the populations of Leeds, Bradford and Wakefield combined. While an additional 8 million would benefit from support, they can't even get onto a waiting list. The need for greater government investment in mental health provision could not be more urgent. My party has said that we would take a strong action to ensure access to mental health treatment within a month of everyone who needs it. This, of course, is currently a distant dream for so many men and women across our country. We would hire 8,500 new staff so that 1 million new people could access treatment by the end of our first term in office. This would be part of our plan for the biggest expansion of NHS in its history, funded by scrapping the non-dom tax status. Men's physical health is of concern as well, because there are disparities in the physical health issues of men as well. Men have shorter life expectancy, with around one man in 5 dying before the age of 65. This becomes even more concerning when you compare life expectancy of men in the most and least deprived areas of the country, and there's a stark 9.5 years gap. Men are also disproportionately affected by heart disease, and more men than women are overweight or obese. Yet, despite all this, men are still less inclined to seek help or advice from medical professionals. This lack of engagement can mean that men are often under-supported without a regular health check, and serious issues can go untreated for longer, sometimes perhaps when it's too late. This is really concerning because we know just how important early intervention can be in the treatment of male-specific cancers and overall cancer incidence, which is 24% higher for men than it is for women. And it just reminds us how improper it is that we have a proper public health strategy for everyone, one that will turn the tide of rising health inequalities and improve health for men as well. A strategy that is focused on early intervention and ensures that people receive the care and the support they need. But instead, we have a government that has chosen to substantially cut public health budget across the country. And that is why a Labour government will invest in the biggest expansion of NHS, as I mentioned earlier. Growing the NHS will also grow our economy and will go a long way to rooting out the inequalities once and for all. But of course, one can't discuss men's health without looking at boys' performance in their education, something that we've touched upon here. In basic terms, boys perform worse than girls by the end of primary school. 70% of girls reach the expected standards in maths, reading and writing, compared with just over 60% for boys. Boys are 3 times more likely than girls to be excluded from school, something that I know causes tremendous concern to many working families up and down the country. And this gap continues to persist at the GCSE and A-level. Young women are more likely to apply to university than young men. Those who do are more likely to drop out, and those who complete their courses are less likely to get a good degree. And this disparity becomes even more acute, Madam Deputy Speaker, among those disadvantaged backgrounds, with young women who were on free school meals are 51% more likely to go into higher education comparable to young men. Disadvantaged white boys are the least likely of all groups to go to university, with just 8.9% continuing their studies. Children only have one chance at an education, which is why reducing these disparities requires early and sustained intervention. These interventions must be designed to ensure that all children, whatever their background, circumstance, gender, have the opportunity to attain well at school and access university education. But instead, we had this Conservative government systematically shut down Sure Start centres, which had provided early intervention support for so many families. There is no sustained programme of education catch-up, something that is so necessary given how many boys and girls are missing out on the support they need. We want a proper education plan for this. That is why we said the Breakfast Club needed to provide it for all children as an element of catch-up, something that has not happened. Whether we consider issues around physical or mental health or educational attainment, we know that not all men and boys are affected by these issues in the same way. Indeed, they're often closely connected in tandem with other deep-rooted inequalities. The government's own strategy, Suicide Prevention Strategy from 2012, for example, highlighted that gay and bisexual men are at much higher risk of harm and substance misuse. And a study from Exeter University found that men from BME backgrounds experience a far greater deterioration in their mental health during lockdown than the white British counterpart. And I will wind up within the next minute or so, Madam Deputy Speaker. I hope you will indulge me for that. Studies have shown that black men are far more likely than others to be diagnosed with severe mental health problems. However, up until the age of 11, black boys do not have a poorer mental health than others in age. So it's quite clear that there are systematic reasons why, after the age of 11, they experience mental health far more than others do. And we know there's a stark divide between children from poorer backgrounds and their wealthy peers, with secondary children on free school meals being 18 months behind by the time they take their GCSEs. And there's no avoiding the fact that white working class underachievement is sympathetic of much larger social, cultural and economic inequality. And therefore we have to take a holistic view. Before I conclude my remarks, I want to remind the House that International Men's Day, which will be marked this Saturday, is just 1 week ahead of the White Ribbon Day, a day on which men across the country are called upon to make a promise that they will never commit, excuse or remain silent about male violence against women. The murder of Sarah Everett by a serving police officer shocked the whole nation. We thought this would be a turning point, but little has changed. There has been a recent murder of Sabina Nessa in a park by somebody she didn't know. While men are also victims of violent crime, women are overwhelmingly more likely to be victims of severe domestic abuse, and this has doubled over the years. I will.
Well, lady for giving way, and she's making some important points about male violence against women. But does she not agree with me then that it's imperative that we end the proliferation of online porn, which normalises violence against women? Of course, there are no excuses for violence against women, and men who commit these crimes should be locked up. But the online pornography is driving this behaviour, and we must recognise that.
Yes, I thank that Honourable Lady for the intervention, and I agree with her on this. At every level, we should all be tackling violence against men and women. And what I want to end by saying is, we must not consider gender equality to be a zero-sum game or a trade-off. Let me be clear. We can address women's safety as well as the serious issues and concerns for men. Indeed, we must do both. Thank you.
Minister Maria Caulfield.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm very pleased to be able to join in this year's debate to celebrate International Men's Day, and I thank the Backbench Business Committee for granting this debate so that we can join together with over 80 countries around the world in marking this day. But of course I want to start by thanking my honourable friend, the member for Don Valley, for not just leading this debate today, but also his consistent campaigning on the issues affecting men and his work as the chair of the Men and the Boys APPG, which continues to shine a spotlight on issues that affect men, from mental health and well-being to boys' education. Now, as the Honourable Member for Watford pointed out, it's disappointing that there are so few members on the benches opposite from the official opposition and indeed the Lib Dems, because I think they have missed a tremendous debate this afternoon where we heard from the Honourable Member from Innismon for the tragic suicide of her brother. We've heard from the Honourable Lady from Rutherglen and Hamilton West, who talked so well about the body image issues that men face that are very often not talked about enough. We also heard from my honourable friend from Penistone and Stockbridge around a multitude of issues affecting men, particularly from their roles and importance in family life to the issues of pornography and how that affects young men as well. And of course, from my honourable friend from Watford, who made a very moving speech on a range of issues. And I want to start on some of the points he made around suicide, because it is a tragedy and unacceptable that 13 male suicides on average occur a day, and that it's the leading cause of death for men under 50, and around 75% of all suicides are indeed in men. And so it is so important that we tackle the issues of mental health that are facing men. And it's not surprising that after a number of years now where we've been tackling the issues of COVID, which has raised distress and anxiety over lockdown and isolation, fears around jobs, that we then go straight into pressures around the cost of living and the impact that has on everyone's mental health, both men and women. But we know that men are less likely to seek help for a variety of reasons, and my honourable friend from Watford pointed out some of those reasons. So it's important incumbent upon all of us across this House in urging all men across our constituencies to reach out to the support that is available. And we have seen in recent years some huge strides forward in providing support. We've now got the Every Mind Matters campaign that provides practical help and tips to help improve our mental well-being. The NHS website, which supports Every Mind Matters, is an easy website to access, provides a range of tools that men could use themselves. And importantly, we now have self-referral to talking therapies so that men no longer, and women as well, but particularly men who are reluctant to seek help, no longer have to go and see their GP to get a referral, can self-refer. And we've seen over 1 million people access talking therapies through self-referral. And we're investing in these services by putting an extra £2.3 billion a year into mental health services to grow and meet that demand. But it isn't enough to say and to expect men to come and seek help themselves. We must make our health services... I will give way.
I thank her for her kind words and feedback. A couple of years ago, I put forward a 10-minute rule bill to make mental health first aid part of workplace first aid. And I just wonder if she would take back to her colleagues across government to see whether we could look at this again. I'd like to bring it forward again, but I think making sure that people in the workplace know they've got someone to go to the same way as they would if they had a physical issue, I think could be transformative. Thank you.
I'm very happy to discuss that with my honourable friend from Watford. He might be pleased to know that in the Department of Health and Social Care there are mental health first aiders on the floors of the offices supporting staff there, and they do a great job. So I am keen to speak to him about that. But we do need a whole systems approach, as the APPG in their report highlighted, which I have read, and obviously makes for interesting reading in terms of how we support men, particularly around the different experiences of health services that they see, and how we can improve the outcomes. And there are a number of organisations that are helping to support mental health for men, like Men's Sheds, which has been raised in the debate, who offer a new way and opportunities to learn skills, but also to build friendships and reduce isolation. And they're helping for men to meet in different ways than traditional settings and building those relationships where they may feel comfortable to speak out and ask for help. But we also need to look at how different approaches can work in tandem. Earlier this year, we put a call for evidence to support the development of a new 10-year plan for mental health. And I'm pleased that some of those groups, such as James's Place, Men's Sheds and Andy's Man Club, are among many of those involved. And in relation to suicide specifically, we want to reduce suicide rates. And if we are to do that, we have to support men who are 75% of the suicides currently. We are looking to bring forward some specific work on that shortly, and I'd be very happy to meet the Honourable Member for Don Valley in particular to see how we can take that work forward. So we are taking significant action in terms of mental health, but there are a number of illnesses that affect men in particular, including heart disease, cancer, smoking, drug and alcohol addiction. And it is true that while the life expectancy in the UK is lower for men, we do know that for women, their time spent in ill health and disability is significantly higher than men. And that is why we have a women's health strategy at the moment, because we want to tackle that basis for why women spend so much of their lives in ill health. In order to improve life expectancy for men, we can tackle that by making sure that we tackle the illnesses that face them. And I know the Honourable Gentleman has challenged me on this before because he feels so strongly that it should be a men's health strategy, but I'm very happy to discuss it with him after the debate today to see what more we can do. It doesn't mean that if we haven't got a men's health strategy or indeed a men's minister, that the government or the NHS takes men's health any less seriously. We'll continue to look for ways that we can support men's health, and there are a number of exciting initiatives like the Man Van, which is an innovative outreach programme launched this year, which provides free health checks for men and aims to boost early diagnosis of prostate cancer and other urological cancers. And this mobile health clinic visits workplaces and churches in London to improve healthcare access for men who are less likely to either come forward or less likely to receive regular health checks. It's developed by the Royal Marsden NHS Trust, which I declare an interest, Madam Deputy Speaker, as I have worked for them in the past and still do some shifts there. But their speciality is enabling us to target men most at risk of developing prostate cancer but have poorer outcomes if they are diagnosed, particularly those in manual jobs who often struggle to access healthcare. Black men who have roughly double the risk of developing prostate cancer and an increased risk of death once diagnosed are also being encouraged to get checked. And once we've got the results of these pilot studies that are being rolled out, if successful, we would roll those out across the country. Now, in the short time that I have, I just want to touch on stereotypes because that has been raised throughout the debate. And phrases like man up and outdated belief of what it means to be a man don't help men to get the help that they need. One issue that wasn't touched on much, but I do want to point out, is that around domestic violence that affects men. The recent crime survey for England and Wales suggests that 13.8% of men aged 16 to 74 have experienced domestic abuse behaviours themselves. That's an estimated 2.9 million male victims. And while the figure is much higher for women, these are a considerable number of men who are experiencing domestic violence, and we need to make sure that we're reaching out to them and supporting them. And the government has increased funding for community-based support focused primarily on male survivors by 60%. And we will be updating Supporting Male Victims statement in August this year to outline the further work that we're going to be doing in this area. Now, in terms of getting equality for men, I think the Honourable Member for Don Valley will be happy with the work that's being done in terms of supporting fathers, particularly fathers who are new fathers who want to take on a full role in family life. And if we look at the work around shared parental leave, men are still more likely than women to have their requests for flexible working turned down by their employer. And men still struggle to get paternity leave rights as well. And we recognise the vital role that dads have in helping to raise their children. That's why we're establishing the Family Hubs and Start for Life programme. But we are committed to ensuring that men get the parental leave that they are also entitled to. So in conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think today's debate has raised some really prominent issues that are affecting men. But we haven't had much time, as one of the contributors said, to celebrate men themselves. And I just want to put on record, we all have dads, granddads, husbands, brothers, friends and colleagues who are men and who do a tremendous job. And I think men just get sometimes a raw deal in terms of criticism. My dad, for example, I grew up when my mum died when I was a teenager, had to take me and my brother on as teenagers, and at a time when there wasn't such thing as childcare or support for single fathers, did an incredible job. He used to take me to the football at the weekend, whether I liked it or not, and that's why I'm now an Arsenal supporter. But he used to have to take me to work as well, where I learnt to paint and decorate, because again, childcare wasn't available in those days. But if we all of us that are married to men here in this place are thankful for the role they do, and the Honourable Member for Stockton and Penistone, or Penistone and Stockbridge, pointed this out, they do support us in our roles. And when we've had a terrible week, or the online trolls are particularly active, just having that cup of tea and making us realise that there's a life outside of this place, we are very grateful for. So the opportunity today to debate the issues that matter to men is important, and I will meet with the Honourable Member for Don Valley to make sure that we pick up on many of the points from today. But it's also an opportunity to celebrate and thank men for all they do for us, not just on International Men's Day, but all year round.
Nick Fletcher to wind up.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. First, I'd like to say thank you to the Backbench Committee for letting us hold this debate in the Chamber today. It's really appreciated. I'd also like to thank all members that have stayed on a Thursday afternoon to speak in this. It's a hugely important debate, and your support in here and out of here is really appreciated. So I want you all to take that home with you if you can. I'd also like to thank Mike Bell and Mark Brooks from the APPG of the issues affecting men and boys. They do all the work. I take a little bit of the glory. That's just the way that it works, but I do want to thank them for that. And I'd also thank Madam Deputy Speaker for letting me wrap up. We've heard some lots and lots of different reasons why I do still believe we need a Minister for Men, and I'm pleased that the Minister is going to meet with me to discuss all the issues. As we heard, there's lots and lots of help out there, and I think as MPs it's our job to signpost people to these places where there is help. So I would ask everybody on International Men's Day, which is Saturday, so if you know somebody who is struggling, send them that text, send them that email, point them in the right direction of help, and don't underestimate the power of your voice just as a person, mine as an MP. People do really need our help, and men especially. I do believe we've really got to get this number down of men committing suicide. I think that is a huge issue. 13 men a day is just absolutely terrible. So I'll be coming back next year and I will be looking at those figures, and I will be holding government to account. But I do thank the government for what they're doing, and as I say, I thank everybody for attending today. Thank you.
The question is, as on the order paper, as many as that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
I beg to move that this House do now adjourn.